Shawn Holley wants to make it look in public as though she left the case because Tory wanted her to do this, and that's a lie. She left the case when we found out that everything we saw indicated that she could have been in bed with Roc Nation from day one.
Welcome, Mr. Sonstar, to Wild Moguls TV.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. For you guys who may not know, this is author of The Destiny of Black Race, Wired for Success If the Foundations Be Destroyed, and The 360 Phenomenon. And he's also has an art background, and he has a ministerial career. 40 years in the apocalypse. How do you say that word?
Apostolic.
Apostolic ministry. Planting churches and leading projects beginning in Canada, the Caribbean, U.S., South America, Africa, including Uganda, Kenya, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and the Kingdom of Swaziland. And he's also the father to Tory Lanez. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, where are you originally from?
I was born in the island of Barbados. Barbados is, I guess, the most easterly island of all of the Caribbean islands. You have it's like a chain of islands that come down between Florida, the peninsula of Florida, and down into South America. So you have it's like a string of jewels in the Caribbean Sea, but then Barbados is like not within that line. It's just like off to the side. It's the most easterly island, and hence has the historic infamy of being the first place that they would drop slaves off when you came through the Atlantic slave trade. That would be like the first little patch of land you would encounter. So that's where I was born originally. Okay. And then, of course, my parents migrated to North America during the 70s. It's a great migration, I guess, coming from every place, but a lot of Caribbean people, came to, find greener economic pastures in places like U.S., Canada, England. My parents first went to the U.S., to New York, and then they came up to Toronto in Canada. So I've lived most of my life out of Toronto.
Out of Toronto.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. What was your childhood like, and what kind of home and spiritual environment did you grow up in?
Well, my childhood was, on one hand, it was a very beautiful childhood because I grew up in an environment where I could walk to the beach. Like I could take just a casual walk to the beach and be there in like 5 minutes. So the beach was very close. Grew up around a lot of water sports. By 9, 10, most kids guys are already knowing how to surf. We made our own surfboards out of 3 and 4 plywood and that kind of stuff. Put the little keel on the bottom and be off to the races. We sort of grew up around that. Grew up around surfing, spearfishing. Going under the water. I mean, I would say by 10, 12 years old, I was already knowing how to dive for what they call conch shells. That's that big shell that you can blow. I'd be able to dive for those at 20, 25 feet down. And just, so that's the kind of life we lived growing up. But of course, on the other side of that, which I did not know or understand until I got older, was that, we were growing up in a colonial environment. We were growing up, Barbados, let me tell you this, a lot of people don't know this because Barbados is a tiny island. It's like 366 kilometers, and that would make it what, like 300 miles all the way around. Mm-hmm. So it's a small island, and growing up their history shows that Barbados boasts the oldest city in the Western Hemisphere. Long before there was in America, there was a city called Bridgetown, and it gained that kind of um, economic. It became like a sort of an economic hub because they brought a lot of the slave trade went through there, as well as sugar that would even come from other islands would come through there in order to be shipped off to England and places like that in Europe. So growing up, you don't even realize that you are in a in a colonially driven um, ecosystem, socioeconomic situation. You don't even realize that because you're just a child. You're just living. And as I grew up, I come to understand and realize, like, there are things you see around you every day seem very, very natural. That the few white folks in the area seem to always be wealthy or seem to always you know, have an air about them that they were above everything else. But you just thought, okay, so this is sort of like the natural order of things. You don't even question it until later on in my life. But that's kind of what I grew up in now, being a part of that, not understanding it, but later on it became a part of what shaped my worldview when I understood that you could be blinded by colonialism, you can ingest that poison for so many years, and you don't even realize until you begin to be enlightened or have a paradigm shift about your reality. And then, you see that you could live under something like that, not understand it, not know that it even exists, but colonialism is not just about geography, it's about a colonization of the mind.
Yeah.
And so as you travel out, I was 16 years old when I left Barbados to join my parents in Toronto. And it was until later, as I began ministry and God started showing me certain things about the economic and geopolitical reality of Black people and people of color. It's only then that you begin to realize, hey, leaving out of a place geographically does not stop you from being colonized as long as your mind is colonized, no matter where you go on the planet. Until you change that blueprint in your thinking, you're under colonialism. And that's what I came to understand.
And the Caribbean's a little tricky because I feel like, but we still, like you say, colonials, America and Caribbean have almost the same colonialized blindness, or, the people are wrapped up into this thing. But it's amazing that the Caribbean, all of their politicians, seems like, or their businessmen, are people that look like them.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to see here,
Right, I get you.
we don't have, we're starting to see it, but it's like we had the same outcome, but you guys were able to see people in power of your kind. So it seemed like this is a Black run country, Black run everything, but we still have the same mental slavery outcome.
Yeah.
How is that?
Brother, let me tell you, as I'm sure we'll probably explore a little further as we talk, but I've traveled a lot and I've had the privilege, the honor of traveling the African continent from uh, east to west, down into the south. And slavery was a scourge on Black people who were brought to the West. But in Africa, they were not enslaved in chattels of chains and whatnot, but their minds became colonized. Because let's remember that, beginning in those colonial days of Europe and Europe's quest to conquer the rest of the world, be it the English, the Spanish, the French, the Portuguese, the Germans, the Belgians, of course, the atrocities that Leopold committed in the Congo. Um, they went out, and so they began to project an image and introduce a lot of lies. When I was in Kenya before I came back to North America at the top of 2018, I spent 7.5 years in Kenya. And one of the things that you'll find if you compare the history of Kenya and the tribes in Kenya to the present day, you'll find that back in the day, they were made up, a lot of African nations were made up of a lot of different kingdoms. It's not that everything was Eden on earth in Africa. However, you find that in that type of an environment, there was more of an understanding of not only who the various tribes were, but there was more of a respect for various territories and how things were done or how things should be done. When the colonial powers came in, they spread a lot of lies. They made different people feel a certain way about the tribes next to you. For example, in Kenya, you have a tribe called the Kikuyu. They are the largest tribe. And when you speak about these things in a North American context, people tend to almost have the idea or the vision of people still living in mud huts, attached roofs, and loincloths or whatever. I mean, you're talking about a thriving metropolis. That's what Nairobi is. You have businesses, you have millionaires, you got billionaires, you got all of these situations. The Kikuyu are known, they have a business gene. Like they just have that, whereas you would have the Luo people who are more Nilotic. Kikuyus are what would be considered Bantu. They tend to be from dark skin to a little bit lighter skin complexion. The Luos now are very dark skinned. They are Nilotic or Nilots by description, right? Very dark skin. They look a lot like Sudanese, ancient Egypt, so on and so forth. And so you will have colonial powers come in and they would tell the Luas or the Luyas, which is my wife is the stock of Luya and Kalenjin, right? That's my wife. Her father's Luya, her mother is Kalenjin. Again, a Nilotic tribe, very dark skin on that side. And by the way, just interesting little factoid, you sit here in North America and you watch the Olympics or the other games, the Diamond League or whatever, and you see Kenyans dominating in terms of distance running. Anything from the 800 to a full marathon, Kenyans are coming in the top 3, and most of the time they're winning those races. Yeah. You think that these are Kenyans from every part of the nation. Kenya has 46, 47 tribes, but it is my wife's tribe on the side of her mother, the Kalenjin. That's where the runners come from. So it's not all over Kenya. Wow. And they happen to live in an environment and a region where the hemoglobin, I think, is in their bodies is raised because of the what do you call that? The heights that they live at above sea level. Okay. So when they come down from there and they're going to run, like these guys can run all day in an environment that everybody else is running in because it's normal to them, whereby you go up there, you are going to have to go through changes. You're going to have to go through a lot of acclimatization in order to even be comfortable running and breathing at those kinds of altitudes and so on. So anyways, that's just a little factoid. But the point being that what happens in these situations is that the colonial powers came in and they sold a lot of lies. They told the Luos, who are known to be very intellectual and many times people who would speak closer to the real English tongue or accent than other tribes. They are the intellects. They're going to be the doctors. They're going after higher education and all that. But the Kikuyus are business people. Whether they go to school or not go to school, they're going to be business people. They're going to be the entrepreneurs. So you come in and you tell these guys, oh, the Kikuyus are all thieves. They're thieves. That's how they got rich. They're thieves. And then you spread lies about this other tribe. And before you know it, you have tribes going against each other rather than recognizing who the real enemy is. Feel me?
Wow.
And so that's the difference between Black Americans and Black people from the Caribbean, the over 100 million Blacks that are in Brazil that you never see on TV. You would think there's no Black people in Brazil, but the highest population of Brazil is Black people and people of color, right? And you know, you have that kind of a situation, you look at it, and you don't realize that we here in America, Blacks in Canada to a little slightly lesser degree, Blacks in the Caribbean, we know and understand what it is to struggle against the chattel of slavery. Because when you are, you know, handcuffed or shackled by slavery, something within the human spirit and the human genome says, this is not how I'm created to be. And so the struggle begins against that. And then you see the uprisings of Haiti, which the West has never forgiven Haiti for, and today has made the rest of the world think that Haiti has this real big problem of governance and blah, blah, blah. No, it's the puppet strings you all have been pulling and keeping those people in bondage economically because you are pissed off historically that they are the ones who led the first successful slave rebellion. They were not supposed to do that. But the point being in all of this, Kenta, is that Blacks in the West knew and you understood because of being in physical chattels of slavery, this is not right. And then you begin a progressive mindset change. It took centuries. It took a lot of time. But you know that what you're struggling against is real. The difference between that and people in Africa, to some degree, the Caribbean, people who are colonized don't see life through the same lens as people who have actually been in the chattels of slavery. You want to do whatever you can to get that off of you. And of course, you know, you've seen the movies, you've read the history, and you see that those who are in even chattels of slavery, after a certain amount of generations, they begin to accept that and it becomes their reality, except for those, you know, the Nat Turners, the, you know, the others, the Sojourner Truths and people like that, the Black Moses herself that brought people out of slavery. You know, you will have a few that see beyond that. But that's what slavery and colonization is meant to do. It is meant to literally impose a new way of thinking on your mind so that you accept it after a few generations. You've seen, I don't know if you've seen Roots. I remember the first Roots that came out, and then I even saw the more updated version of Roots. And when they brought Kunta Kinte over, and they kept saying to him, you know, what's your name? Kunta, no, your name is Toby. And they beat that to that boy, beat him within an inch of his life until he said, you know what, I'm not going to die here today. So I'll just go ahead and accept this name for now, right? But the whole system is intended to bring you to a place where you just accept that this is your reality. And then, of course, over time, you know, they misrepresented the Bible, and I want to make that very, very clear. You hear people talking about, oh, the Bible was used to enslave us. The Bible has never been used to enslave anybody. Reality is that the misrepresentation of what the Bible taught was used to enslave people, and we need to know the distinction.
And what do you think how did they trick us with the Bible?
First of all, I mean, you have to now go back to the Great Renaissance period in Europe that began somewhere in the 1500s time, which would be the 13th and 14th century. You go back there and you see the Renaissance that began in Florence, Italy, and out of that you began to have artists and politicians of renown during the time of Michelangelo and Da Vinci, who painted the Sistine Chapel. During that time, you had for one of the only times in history, you had a Spanish Pope. You had a Pope who was not an Italian. So he had his own struggles against the system that basically was trying to say that the popes should be Italian, right? And so he had to go against that grain when he became Pope. And reason why I'm mentioning Pope Borgia, he was called, or rather he was from the Borgia family. I forgot what his each of them take on a name beyond the family name when they become Pope. But nonetheless, this Borgia Pope, like I said, he's struggling against the status quo. And so when he began to commission paintings and so on and so forth, he wanted those paintings to be in his image. And so one of the things he did was he used his son, what was his name? Cesare Borgia. He asked that his son be used as the model when they were painting like the Last Supper with Jesus in the middle and so on. So they started painting the disciples, the apostles, as being white. They painted them in the European image, even more so the Italian type image. And so the picture or the paintings that have perpetuated throughout history from that time till now, even times when people would take the Bible and put images of people in the Bible, you ain't never seen Jesus.
Yeah.
There are no photos of Jesus. There's no paintings of Jesus. Nobody that you know or the generation before you knew Jesus or knew anybody that knew Jesus or knew anybody that knew Jesus. Yeah. So all those images are false and they're fake, but they were intended to make you think that this is the image of the Godhead. This is the image of the angels. Everything is white and whitewashed. That's not just revisionist history, that's rejectionist history. Yeah. That's rejectionist history. They are rejecting reality to bring you a fake reality that they want you to believe in. So that's where that perpetuated from till the present day.
And what's even crazy to add to what you're saying, I've actually saw some researchers, some of these paintings, like the Sixtine Chapel and stuff like that, where they're white imagery, they actually didn't do it right. And it seems like a lot of these pictures were there before they even came into an existence, and they were literally overpainting and changing them to white people.
Yeah.
Because there's some parts where they forgot to touch, where the hands or fingers are exposed and they're brown.
Right. Oh, you're talking about the paintings that before the Black Madonnas and all of these types of situations.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course. But the artists of that time, they did their own paintings. And by the way, what's very interesting is that Cesare Borgia in history was known to be homosexual. Wow. He was known to have a great crush on his sister Lucretia, and it is believed, and it's even been documented, that they had incestuous relationships. And this is the guy that then stands before the world, his image. Everywhere you go, there's images of that face, or other artists that have done it maybe veered slightly, but you can see that is the image that became universal as to who Jesus is supposed to be. But nothing could be further from the truth. And don't even get me started, because we'll need a whole other interview for that one to go right into it.
Who were the first people that influenced your mindset about purpose, faith, and expression?
The first people that did that, that's an interesting question. Okay, so I was in the entertainment world, and somewhere between age 17 and 19, as I was, on a quest to be the very best dancer that ever danced. That was my quest. Like, if I'm going to do this, I want to be the best at it. I'm sure a whole lot of other people had that mindset as well. But that was my focus. That's where I began to have personal supernatural encounters with God. And people who know me throughout my history and ministry will tell you that I am a person who gets a lot of dreams, a lot of visions from the Lord, and visions that have given direction to politicians, to business people, to leaders in many different scenarios and nations. Uh, Sometimes I'll get insights while I'm asleep that will probably not happen for 3 years, 4 years down the road. I get people every so often that will come up to me that I have not seen in a number of years, and they'll come and they say, hey, uh, I go by the title of an apostle, and many people know me as such, Apostle Sonstar, Apostle Peterson. They'll come and say, hey, you know what you said to me back such and such a year or whatever, it happened. It actually came to pass. I don't claim any credit or any personal power. All I can say is that anyone who will dedicate their life to spending time in the presence of God and hearing from God and reading the Word, your mind can be prepared for God to show you things that will come in the future. Mm-hmm. So I would say the beginnings of my story and my walk with God happened through encounters with God. Because truth be told, I did not grow up with a family who were in Christ. I am the one who baptized my mother. I baptized my sister. I brought the gospel to my sisters. So I didn't learn from them, is what I'm saying. So I started to have encounters with God. And while I was, on my quest to be the best, I heard a voice one day, and at that time I didn't know the voice is God, because I didn't have any relationship with God to speak of. But I heard a voice that said to me, I think I was walking downtown Toronto, said, there must be there must be more to life than what you know about it. And instinctively, when you start to encounter the Spirit of God, there are things that God will say. You look into the Bible and you'll see God telling people certain things, and it will take him all of 5-6 seconds to say a sentence to you. But that 5-6 seconds is going to take you a lifetime to walk it out. That's the difference between the supernatural and the natural, right? So when I heard that voice, there must be more to life than what you know about it, instinctively, I knew that voice was saying to me, there's more to life than flesh and blood, what you can see with your natural eyes. There is a world beyond. Yep. And you're not perceiving it right now. And so I said, yeah. It stirred something in me that I now wanted to know what could be more than what I was seeing, because I wanted more out of life. There's something within the true divine human condition that wants to succeed, that wants to grow. That's normal. If that's not happening in you, something is abnormal there. And so as I began to do that, it's almost like the powers of hell were hearing that conversation. I'm not saying they did, but shortly after that, I remember back in the day, I used to have a relationship with this Italian girl, beautiful girl. And it's like, just after I heard that and I came home to her, she said to me, oh, I've been hearing and learning about this transcendental meditation, right? A system of meditation that was established by a guy called Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. He became a mentor to the Beatles while they were out there singing, My Sweet Lord. And then they ending off in the outro of that song talking about Hare Krishna, Hare Rama. They were venerating the chief of the gods of India in their 33 million gods at that time. So this is what she said to me. And I said, okay, let me check that out. Let me see what this is all about. And so that's the first time that I began to delve into what you call the esoteric or the ethereal, trying to find truth. That was my question in my heart. But the devil was trying to deceive me to go down a path. And so that opened up the door. Before you knew it, I was looking into astrology, numerology, metaphysics, all of these systems. I spent time because I wanted to find God. But what I began to realize is that over a period of time, when you're looking at all these systems, at some point or the other, the books that you're reading is referring back to Christ. And they'll either try to make you feel like, well, Jesus was a messenger, and then there's these other messengers. But I notice a common thread. Many of them are referring back to Jesus. So I want to know, okay, if this is the case, then I need to check out this Jesus guy. I need to know what this dude was he's really all about. And that's also what started to turn me towards the Bible. And then the other thing is that, as I told you, I've had a lot of dreams and visions in my life, and they still happen to this very day. I get songs with arrangements in dreams and visions, lyrics sometimes in dreams and visions. And some of the melodies are so beautiful. It used to be a time when I would hear them, and consciously in my sleep, I'm saying, you know what? I'll get up in the morning and I'll explore that. Get up in the morning and it's gone. Like you don't even remember it, or just a little bit of it. So what I started doing, I think over time I programmed myself. When I get that, I'm getting up right there and then. And thank God that we're in the era of technology that you can have a voice note recorder on your phone. And I would get up, maybe sneak off to the bathroom, not to disturb my wife, whatever. And I'll get those melodies out and I start putting down whatever the lyrics is that I'm hearing. Or, you know, I remember in the morning, I go back to it and I can now start to write some of the lyrics that I got, or I refer back to the dreams. And the essence of that is telling me what I should be writing about. Yeah. So I started to have those types of encounters before I knew Christ. Before I had a relationship with Christ, I started to have these dreams, Kenta, where the themes of them were always similar in this regard. Like I would be confronted like great evil, real evil, right? And out of that, it would end up that at the last minute or whatever, God would step in, or an angel would step in. I've seen angels like that in dreams and vision, and rescue me, deliver me from what was impending doom. Sometimes I'm so literally scared, knee-knocking fear, because remember, at that point, I didn't have a relationship with God. It's like you and I, we have a mutual friend that introduced me to you, right? But when I was introduced to you, I was on the phone. I like what we were talking about, but I don't know Kenta Rooks. I don't know you like that. You don't know me like that. Yeah. Right? But as we started to meet and talk, what happened? Relationship begins to grow. Yes, sir. Out of that. Same thing with God. I was hearing about God. Even God was introducing himself to me through dreams and visions, to show me certain things about my life and my future and where I was going. But to say I knew God, no, I never knew him until the day that I came to the realization that Jesus Christ actually came into the earth. In fact, Paul the Apostle would say God the Father was personally present in Christ, reconciling the world to himself. And when I began to understand that and realize the reality of a God that loved me so much, he was willing to come personally present and go to a cross to pay the price for my sin. Hey, I want to know you and I want to have a relationship. And I can tell you, as I sit in this chair right now, the 80s and the 90s were an era in my life where music and the music produced during those times was like a blur to me. It was like a blur. Why? Meaning that I didn't have any time. I didn't give time to knowing what was the latest hit, what was the, I think of probably very few artists during that time I had an understanding what they were doing, or took the time to hear what they were doing. Like a Michael Jackson, I've always loved his artistry. And so, but beyond that, I hardly understood or was conscious of what was going on around me. Why? Because I had literally separated myself and I studied. I studied, I studied, I studied, I studied. And the scriptures was my main source book for history, for African history, for world affairs, and that's what really shaped my worldview. It was really in the late 90s, coming into the 2000s, that God was showing me, okay, I mean, during that time, of course, I was involved in ministry. I was planting churches around the world, as I told you. And so from that point, that was my focus until like the late 90s, early 2000s, is when I began to get involved back into things that had to do with what I know as an artist. I had one encounter in the midst of all of that, as I seal this particular question. When God called me into the ministry, I first gave my life to Christ. And about a year and a half, for whatever reason, my life started to move in year and a half cycles. So about a year and a half after that, I received a specific call from God. That was by the time that I had met my late wife, who would be the mother of 6 children for me. And during that time, I was called to the ministry. I received a specific direct call as I was praying one day at an altar in a citywide crusade rather, after after that night of ministry. I'm kneeling and I'm praying, and I heard the voice of God as clear as I'm speaking to you now. I heard God said, "Are you ready now to be fully consecrated to the ministry to which I've called you?" And I remember saying to God, "God, you know, I'm going to marry this woman who is Tory's mom. I'm going to marry to her. How will I support a family?" And again, God spoke to me. Am I not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Am I not the one that brought Moses and Israel through the Red Sea? And I was like, God, you don't need to say anymore. I'm putting it all in your hand and I'm going for broke, as they say. I'm ready. I'm ready to do this. So that's where it started for me. So I wouldn't say that it was so much people that influenced me. I did a lot of searching, and perhaps I could have saved myself some time if I really, in fact, do have had mentors. But the mentors came after that. Yeah.
So now you said you had prophetic dreams and these visions, right? And when was it, or who was the person or group that realized that you had it actually, and started to promote, or using your thing as a tool, using your prophecies as a tool? What was the first, I would say, people or group that used your prophecies?
Okay. Again, so I met my late wife, Sendili. We met in 1981. We met in 81, and she had just been back after 2 years of going to a Bible college in Western Canada, in a place called Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. And we came together. Truthfully, people say they don't know about love at first sight, but for us, it was that, period.
Wow.
To understand, I came out of the entertainment background. I came out of a world of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, as the saying goes. Of course, it was funk for me. Just so, let's just make that clear. Right?
Sex, drugs, and funk.
Yeah, exactly. Just sex, drugs, Rick James, Parliament Funkadelic, Earth, Wind, and Fire is all my all-time favorite band,
Wow.
But that's where I came from. And so for a period of time, I really went through a time of, I would call it loneliness and aloneness. Because remember, I was searching. I was searching. And on that path of searching, I think my last encounter was when I began to get interested in the lifestyle of Rastafarianism, Bob Marley and everybody. So I used to grow locks and the whole 9 yards. I just never believed that Emperor Haile Selassie was the incarnation of Christ. But beyond that, I like the lifestyle, the the diet, you know, the whole 9 yards of it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was doing for a period of time. By the time that I met her and we came to know each other, she was very much involved in church. I was not. I was still on my last leg of searching things out. By then, I had given my life to Christ, and uh, her very good friend that was in Toronto, she lived in Montreal, but her great good friend rather uh, had, you know, a sister who came to know me and knew that I was involved in music, and said to me one day, I'm going to be doing this show. She was in high school, so I'm going to be doing this show. We have a yearly show. We call it the Green and Gold, which is the colors of the school. And I'm putting together a band. Would you come and be a part of that? Would you help us? I said, sure. And God used that instrument. We went and we did gospel, like we did gospel straight up. And we, you know, as we say, we killed the room. Like we just tore it up that night, right?
Mhm.
All these guys were musicians from Humber College in Canada, sort of like your Berkeley in California for music. And that's where we started. That's where we started. And we realized, hey, we got something here. Why don't we just keep this going? And so we called ourselves Shining Star at that time. And it was through that vehicle that, you know, I started to get involved in music, but now it was not in the secular arena. It was not in the clubs. It was not in the arenas. It was in none of that. I was just doing music for the Lord. And I was happy to do that. It was then that I had the encounter when God said to me, are you ready to go, you know, full time for me? Will you do this for me full time? And I knew he was calling me not just to play music, but to teach, to preach, to minister the gospel of Christ. And so I left Toronto and I went to Montreal again a year and a half. I stayed there. My wife's parents loved me more like a son than a son-in-law. And so I stayed with them as we were preparing for our wedding and all of that. And I attended a church there. And that's where I was really taught. I sat for the first time at the feet, as we say metaphorically, of a real mentor, teacher of the gospel of Christ. He was laying solid foundations in the word in my life. Then after about a year and a half, he came to me and said, hey, I want to ordain you along with two other people that, you know, I've been watching and you guys are ready. And I said, yes. I was excited because that means now I'm going to go from there and going into real ministry at that time. And I remember the day that I said yes, I was in Montreal, and I heard the voice of God came to me and said, son, creativity is not of the devil and it's not of the world. I want you to use what I gave you to glorify me. So I knew that somehow my ministry would also involve the arts. It would involve dance because that's where I started. I started as a dancer in the industry, became a choreographer, started to direct stage productions and so on. God said, I want you to use all of that to glorify me. And that's how our ministry started. Our ministry started on the foundations or the cornerstones of preaching the authentic word, prayer and intercession, and the arts. In 2 years, we grew from 15 to over 450 people. In 2 years, we were already planting churches in islands in the Caribbean, Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad. By the following year, in 86, we were planting a church in South America in the nation of Guyana, which is one of the only English-speaking nations in that whole continent. That's where we planted a work there. And within that same year, I was going over to Uganda. So things were growing rapidly because I took the time to invest not just into teaching a growing church, but teaching leaders. I raised up leaders and imparted to them. And it was from there that that real, let me say, a garden bed of the prophetic started. And so what I knew, what I was learning, and what I was receiving, I was imparting to them. And at one point we had, as we would say, 21 elders. And an elder is not necessarily an old person. It just means somebody who is mature in the things of God. And out of that 21, most of them were couples, maybe just about 2 or 3 people that were not couples. And I would say we had probably about a 98 to 99% prophetic presbytery, meaning a prophetic group of people that met to hear from God and to seek God's face as to what God is saying, whether to the local house, to the nations we were now spreading out into, and so on. So that's basically how it happened for me. It was just organic. It was never a time where we decided, well, you know, we're going to use this as a tool or use that as an instrument or whatever. We just really, you know, we prayed and we obeyed, plain and simple.
Now, did you ever see like, because you know, here in America, when it seems like you want to do the right thing or you choose to do the right thing, and it can be seen that's too powerful, and the powers that be seems like to punish you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
You understand?
mm-hmm.
Did you ever feel any of that type of uh, politics when you was just in your sincere spiritual journey and prophetic journey, just to help people and bring people to God? Did you ever feel that there was a force that looked at you as a threat?
Brother, who was it? Was it Jesus or Paul? Jesus said, "Woe be to you." And you know, the ancient, the Elizabethan or Victorian terminology of the word woe
Yeah.
means look out for punishments, look out for things coming against you. So Jesus said, woe be to you when all men speak good of you.
Yeah.
What's he saying there is simple. If you are not getting haters and you're preaching the gospel, you're compromising. You're not really bringing the true gospel, because the true gospel is always going to have haters, not beginning with people, not beginning with men and women. That begins in the spirit world. Let's not forget, there is a realm or a dimension of darkness. There are wicked spirits. There is evil. Satan is real, okay? And if people don't believe Satan is real and that demonic powers are real, then hear this. I'm in Toronto. This is in the late 80s. And there was a world famous evangelist by the name of Dr. Morris Sorello. Like, you used to see miracles in his meetings, real miracles. You know, medically verifiable, miraculous things that would happen in there. Yeah. So I'm still a young minister. I'm still growing. And he was one of the people that, to me, was somebody that mentored me by his teachings, by his books. Never met the man in person. I am in that meeting. This is a big conference. Thousands of people are present. This is in my city, because he came to Toronto. Right in the midst of the service, I feel a hand tapping me on the shoulder. I turn and someone is saying to me, Apostle, we need you to come into the back. There's a girl there that is demon possessed. I'm like, okay, because that's part of what we did. We cast demons out of people. So this is what I'm saying. People don't believe that demons are real. I can tell you my own experiences with demons, okay? It's not just something that Hollywood invented. Hollywood is art trying to imitate life. Don't you ever forget it. It's real. And so I went back there, and I'm not going to exaggerate this for effect. I saw a girl that was all of 98 to 100 pounds soaking wet, a skinny little girl. She couldn't have been no more than 21. And there were big men trying to hold her down, because there's demonic powers. You see, demons get around a gospel meeting and worship is going on. Many times it's going to trigger a manifestation because it is torment to them. Light is a torment to the powers of darkness. That's real. And I went back there, and this little skinny girl, literally with a toss of her arm, like just shaking big men off. You know,
Yeah.
it was like, it's like a bunch of linebackers trying to rush a quarterback off the scrimmage line,
Yeah.
and they're tackling. He's like, because your quarterback is usually a little guy.
Yeah.
Compared to these guys that are,
Oh my God.
this ball is not getting through here, kind of a thing. That's what was happening. This girl was just literally flipping these guys. And I took one look at her and I said, Satan, in the name of Jesus, come out of her. And as I'm looking at you now, she turned and looked at me. And this is what she said: Peterson, I hate you. Never saw that girl before in my entire life. Never before that day. Didn't know who she was. Just that was some girl being oppressed by demonic powers. And I commanded the devil to come out of her in the name of Jesus. Very important.
Wow.
And she just yelled, this thing in her yelled out at me and called my surname, Peterson. I hate you. How would that even be possible? And Satan is not omnipresent like God is omnipresent. The so-called personal devil can only exist in one place at a time.
Yeah.
But through a network of demonic powers, my name was already known. And in the book of Acts, at one point, I think it's Acts chapter 19, when Paul went into a city called Ephesus, which is in present-day Turkey, right? Paul went there and had the biggest movement of his life. Paul left some 300,000 Christians in Asia after he had been there, I think, for about 3 years. In the midst of Paul's ministry, it comes to a place where it says, and God wrought special miracles by the hand of Paul, insomuch that his robe that he was wearing when he was preaching was so full of the anointing of God, the yoke-breaking anointing, that they took it, they cut it up, and they took little cloths and went to people who were not even in the vicinity of the meeting, family members and whatnot, said that were sick or possessed of demons, and put that cloth on them, and the demons came screaming out of them. That's how powerful was the presence of God in such situations. Now, today, of course, we got a bunch of charlatans out here that sometimes, try to do that kind of thing just so that they can, send me this amount of money and I'll send you this, and please give me a break already. So in the midst of all of that, as God is doing this through Paul, the scripture says that there were 7 sons, and they're identified as the sons of a man called Sceva, who was a leader in one of the Jewish synagogues in Ephesus. They said, okay, you know what? Let's do our own ministry and go cast some of these demons out so we get some popularity. And when they did that, they went and they said that they called the name of Jesus over a man that was possessed. You know what the man did? He jumped on them and he said, Paul, I know. Jesus, I know. This is years after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, right? Mm-hmm. They never met Jesus, but the demon said, Paul, I know. Jesus, I know. But who are you? How dare you come after us? We don't know you. You don't have that kind of clout in the spirit world. You don't have that kind of authority. And said the man jumped on them, stripped their clothes off, and they literally went streaking out of the temple. It's in Acts chapter 19. Wow. So imagine that. In the network of demonic spirits, the demon here is saying, I know who Jesus is. I know who Paul is. But who are you? Are you known in the realms of darkness? So let me tell you, you don't do the ministry of Christ with any authority and with any power without having haters, but they begin in the spirit world. By the time it gets to people coming at you because you're preaching Christ, reality check is that they're being inspired by demonic powers. Of course, you can offend people too, but as he said, woe to you when all men are speaking good of you. I don't see people coming at me necessarily as a negative. To me, it becomes a thermometer that's testing the temperatures of what I'm doing. And yeah, when you're coming at me like that, that means I still got it. Christ is still with me.
Yeah. Nah, and it's yeah, it's a scary thing. While we're on the subject, um, maybe you can bring it all together, but the esoteric and say the secret societies and Illuminati,
Mm-hmm.
they have a like almost a fixation with King Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think people know one of King Solomon's powers that was blessed by God
Mm-hmm.
was that he was able to communicate and make these demon spirits more like his soldiers and slaves per se.
Mm-hmm.
But he wasn't a magician.
Mm-hmm.
He was just blessed by God.
Mm-hmm.
But but a lot of esoteric people or devil worshippers,
Mm-hmm.
they love to connect to Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that?
Well, first of all, in the Bible itself, there's nothing written about Solomon being involved with I would say the supernatural or the
Okay.
esoteric. Solomon was a man of tremendous wisdom and laid down some strategies
Mm-hmm.
for life, for family, for business, for governance, in so much that it is known that kings and queens came from far and wide to receive wisdom from Solomon about governance and how to run their economies and so on and so forth. The the secret societies, quote unquote, secret societies are not a new thing. That has existed all the way back to the Babylonians, to other empires that were here. Of course, Egypt, which today black people are always seeking to run back to. The Nile Valley, the this, and the Egyptian. You have guys out here that honestly, one of these days, I'm looking forward to having a serious one-on-one debate with some of them. Um, uh, because some of the things that they teach, uh, they begin from a genesis of trying to disprove the authenticity of the scriptures. And so you will hear things like from men like Yosef ben Yochanan, who claims that he is an Ethiopian Jew, and I don't have any issues with that. Um, but when they start to tell you things like, Moses received the Ten Commandments because he used to be a prince of Egypt and he learned all of that already. There was no revelation of God. Well, here's one very important issue, Mr. Ben Yochanan, or son of Yochanan is what Ben Yochanan would mean. Here's one very important question you got to answer for me. The Ten Commandments begins with the first commandments, which says, "You shall have no other gods but me." Egypt was a polytheistic society.
Mm-hmm.
The Hebrews and others of their time believed in the one God, which was monotheistic. They didn't believe in a bunch of demon deities like what the Egyptians would, with Ra, the sun god, being the top of their Parthenon of pantheon rather of gods and deities.
Mm-hmm.
If God is saying in his very first commandment, if you're going to worship me, if you're going to walk with me, if you're going to serve me, you cannot have any other gods but me.
Mm-hmm.
That's what becomes the preamble, if you will, or the statement of intent for this document Moses is about to write, called the Ten Commandments. So if that is real, and if the scriptures are true, and I believe that they are, then it totally demolishes all of this other, belief that Moses got his instructions from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or what they call the coming forth or the bringing forth of morning and of evening, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. That's all demonic.
Mm-hmm.
That's all secret society.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what these people, you said that they look to Solomon, but they look back to those pyramids in Egypt because those pyramids were established based on a lot of ritual, a lot of occultism, a lot of demonic systems. They believe that that beings that were the bodies of men with the head of dogs, the Anubis would take that body into the afterlife. That's some deep, deep, dark, demonic nonsense.
Yeah.
Well, let me not say the word nonsense. It is very real, but it has zero to do with God's system of worship. It's satanic.
Yep.
It's satanic. So when they come over to Solomon, now there's so much ignorance. Solomon, at some point in his life, began to veer off and worship at the altars of some of his wives. That is history. That's real. Okay? And so in all of that, if there's any systems that would seek to honor Solomon as somebody showing something that is secret that you don't really get when you're looking through the pages of the Bible, they would have to be referring back to those type of things. But there's nothing in scripture that shows Solomon having any power to control animals and all that. To me, a lot of that is mythical.
Oh, wow. Okay. And can you explain international prayer circles and what does that mean to you personally and spiritually?
Okay. So in my experience, I told you before, we started ministry in Toronto in 1983. Within the first 3 months of doing ministry, I came out of Montreal. I advertised I was going to be having this seminar in Toronto, and I was expecting at least hundreds, if not thousands, of people to show up.
Mhm.
Well, I think I got about 17 people that showed up to my first meeting. But guess what? We had 100% salvation of anybody who came that didn't know Jesus. They walked out of there having received Jesus. And so when I started ministry, I started with about 15 people.
Okay.
Started in my house, in fact, teaching, Bible studies and whatnot. And as I said to you before, we grew in about 2 years. We had grown from that number and we became over 450 people and growing and growing. In the first 3 months of teaching, ministry at the house and then branching out into a place we used to be called the Knights of Columbus in Toronto, the center that we started to rent space from them to have Sunday meetings and all of that. Within that first 3 months, I got 2 very specific directives from the Holy Spirit. One day I heard God say to me, "Son, raise me up the strongest intercessory prayer force this nation has ever seen or known." Talking about Canada. Intercession or intercessory means to go between, and it really speaks of a sort of a priesthood ministry where you are standing between God and humanity, praying on behalf of humanity, and also hearing what God's will is in the midst of it. So I've always told people that what makes intercession or the prayer of intercession different from any other form of prayer, because there's different kinds of prayer. There's the prayer of faith, there's the prayer of agreement, there's a prayer of consecration. There's a lot of different types of prayers that you could go into when you're praying. But what makes intercession totally different from any other form of prayer is that intercession is never about self. Like I can ask God to fulfill my needs, anything from a house to live in, to a car, to whatever I need on a daily basis. Physical well-being, my kids, my family, my wife. I can ask God to bless me in those areas. But that's me. That's talking about the needs that I have, which are real needs. We all have.
Mm-hmm.
Feel me? But when it comes to intercession, if I ever am before God and I'm praying about me, it's not intercession. It's not intercessory prayer. It disqualifies it from being that, because intercession is never on behalf of self. It's always on behalf of somebody else.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's what I started to teach my team. Let's stand in the gap for the city. Let's stand in the gap for the nation. Let's stand in the gap for the nations of the world that they might come to know Christ. And so that's where we started from. The other direction or directive that I received during that first 3 months, I was up teaching one Wednesday night, and in the midst of the teaching, I heard the voice of the Lord speak. You're going to have a street meeting. That means you're going to take the gospel outside of these four walls. You're going to take it to the streets. And so we sought God. We fasted for about 7 days, praying, Lord, where do you want us to go? We were directed to one of the busiest intersections in downtown Toronto at Yonge Street and Dundas Street. That's like a replica, slightly smaller replica of Times Square in New York. There are people wall to wall on Friday nights, Saturday nights. People are moving around down there. That's where we went. We went out. I started preaching with not even a bullhorn. I was about to say bullhorn. There was no bullhorn, just me and the crowd. And, you know, sometimes you get like 3 or 4 people who stop to see what this madman is saying. And just as they begin to listen, next thing I saw was like jugglers. These guys would come, jugglers and flamethrowers, and they start juggling. And my 3, 4 little people would go, this is a better spectacle over here. They would just leave, right? So I said, okay, so this is how we're going to do this. All right. Next Saturday, we showed up with the full rhythm section. We showed up with drums, guitars, speakers, and we had the loudest generator you could ever hear. We had to run that bad boy way down almost to the next block, my friend, right? And plug it in down there and run it back to our board and our speakers and so on. And from the time we struck up that band, boom, 200, 300 people would just gather around. We did that for 6 summers over 5 years on that spot. That's part of the reason why we grew. But before we would ever do that, I had dedicated and faithful people who would go down there. We would start at 6 o'clock, and we did this, of course, in the summertime in Canada. It's daylight saving time. The sun ain't going down until 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. Right. And it's nice, cool. It's like the perfect environment. Yeah. And so we would go out there. But I had people who were so dedicated and committed to the kingdom of God that they would go out there from 12, 1 o'clock in the day and just sit on the site and incognito. They would just pray. They would just deal with the spiritual powers in that place of commerce, because we're right in front of what is known in Canada as the Eaton Centre, one of the biggest malls, one of the most contemporary style malls that you've ever walked through, you know, at that corner. And there was a little alcove. And so we would go. The mall is shutting down by 6 o'clock. We start, right? And you can never tell who you would meet. People would come together, and by the end of the night and throughout like 3 or 4 altar calls, as we would call them, we had people who didn't even know each other would be holding hands in a big circle. Wow. And people were receiving Christ as their Lord and personal Savior. People come from everywhere. I've even met Inuit people down there, and Inuits are what people call Eskimos, but come to find out it's sort of a racist term. So the real term is Inuits. Man, we even met Inuits down on that corner. Wow. And, you know, to them, we're like, oh, it's nice and cool evening. To them, it's like, they feel like it's boiling up because they live in the snow. Yeah. So, you know, we had some amazing experiences, but that's where prayer and intercession started for me. And then as we would go into nations, like Uganda was I always say to people, Uganda was my first entry back to Africa after 400 and something years, okay, wow. of enslavement of our people. But I had dedicated people that I could send a team ahead of me. I sent a team ahead. Our first entrance to Uganda, they went for a month. And their assignment is just to pray, just to pray, just to pray, prepare the spiritual atmosphere for the seeding of the Word of God. And so that's where it really started for us. And then as it took hold, we started to host yearly we would host we call it the International Prophetic Intercessory Prayer Conference. People came from Africa, came from the Caribbean, America, various cities would come to that conference. And there was fire, a fire of the Holy Spirit in those conferences. People would take that, go back to their own cities. They would start praying for their cities and started to see movements of God happening in those cities. And brother, all this time, I'm just being a little instrument in the hand of God, to be honest with you. I don't claim any power of myself that I did this and blah, blah. No, it was all God. Like I said, we prayed and we obeyed. But that's where it started for me, going out and teaching people how to pray effectively.
So now, you started this with your late wife?
Yes.
And you guys started all
Yes.
this. So now, tell us about your family life. Tell us, what was it like having the 6 kids and developing this, and what was the difference between what you guys were developing and then after she left? Like,
Okay.
how did the transition?
Okay. Well, like I said, we started from the beginning. Her and I, we launched out. She was already involved in ministry. She used to minister with a team of about 3, 4 people. That was the second time I was seeing her. First time I was seeing her is I was doing a concert. As I told you, we had a gospel band called Shining Star, and we were at a citywide conference, and we were ministering there, in song and so on and so forth. And that's when her and I really connected. I had seen her once before that,
Okay.
but it was just like a hi and bye.
Yeah.
Because her friend introduced the same friend of the girl I told you that asked me to be a part of this. Um, Sorry, the same sister of the girl I said asked me to be a part of this band that they were forming. She was almost like best friends with my late wife.
Okay.
And so I was there at the house one day, and when I came into the house, she was there, and she was just probably as homely as you could see. She just was dressed with a kind of a house robe, whatever, hair parted back into lines or cornrows as we call them.
Yeah.
And so we just kind of said hi and bye. Next thing I know, I'm at the concert at this crusade, and I saw this person come up, and she was bold. She just came up. I was talking to a friend of mine's wife, to his wife. This was after the concert, and she just came to me and politely said, "Excuse me, can I speak to you for a minute?" And I was like, "Yeah, Marcy, I'll see you later." And we started talking. It was that instant.
Wow.
The magic happened right there. But this time, she didn't come out dressed with no little house frock, no whatever. She was looking fine. And so that's where we met each other that night. And from there, everything progressed. But she had already been involved with her evangelistic team in ministry, had recently come back from Bible college. And so she invited me to come to a meeting they were doing the next day, that Sunday evening. And I went to that meeting, and that's where our relationship grew from there. And so we started out in ministry together. There is I know that on the search engines on the internet, they will say things like my ministry catapulted or accelerated after her passing. But that's not even reality. Truth is that she passed in 2003. So in 1983 is when we started ministry together in Toronto, and all of the growth that we saw came during those times. So you're looking at 23 years of relationship that we had together, and that's where we spread out together in ministry.
Now, did you guys travel a lot as a family? You and the 6 kids to like
Yes.
Africa, America? Like, was it like that?
Yes, my kids traveled a lot with me and my wife. not just travel. There are times when in 93, after 10 and a half years of ministry in Toronto, we left and we went and got established in Orlando, Florida. So we spent 6.5 years in Orlando, went to Barbados to nurse one of the churches back to health, so to speak. Stayed there for a year and a half. And then we went to South Florida and lived in Miramar, which is just outside of, just north of Miami, Florida. So we not only traveled, but at times we moved together as a family. So from very early, my kids were getting exposed to a different type of worldview than the average child, because they were experiencing different things and experiencing different places and so on.
Wow. Now, explain little Tory. When Tory was coming up, you said you had prophetic visions.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever have prophetic visions of where Tory's career and what did you see this when he was young?
That's an interesting question. Truth be told, I did not have any specific visionary encounters that told me about his life and where he was going. However, when my wife, Cindelia, at the time was pregnant with him, she was about 6 months pregnant, and her and I traveled to do a conference in Washington, D.C. So we stayed across the bridge. I can't remember if that's the Chesapeake Bridge or whatever that was, just in Northern Virginia, which is on the other side of the river. So I was there. And again, the subject of that particular meeting for about the whole weekend was around prophetic intercession, strategic spiritual warfare. I was teaching. And I remember being in the hotel room just before the evening session. So she's preparing to go to the meeting with me, and I'm in the living room of the suite, and I'm pacing back and forth. I'm praying. I'm praying. And as I'm praying, I begin to quote the book of 2 Peter chapter 1. And it states, "For you would do well to take heed as unto a light shining in a dark place, until the day dawns and the day star arises in your heart." Holy Spirit said, that's the name of your child. We didn't know if the child was going to be boy or girl. We never were into doing the reveal and all of that ahead of time, because we always wanted a surprise, to see, oh my God, it's a boy, it's a girl, whatever the case may be. So that's the child that was in the womb.
Wow.
Not knowing whether it would be male, female, only heard the Holy Spirit said, that's the name of your child. You'll call him Daystar. He will be a revolutionary light of progressive revelation to a generation. That's what that means. The day star dawning in your hearts. And so that's what God said to me. So I named him. So I did not at that point in time know that he would be who he is. But what a lot of people don't know, Kenta, is that my entire family, all of my kids are artistic. All of them are musicians. I've been blessed by God with an artistic gene, if you will. And right now we have the Jackson 5, if you will.
Wow.
But all of them are potential to be Michael Jackson. That may seem like a real boast to a lot of people hearing me. But it's not a boast. It's just a reality. I've never held my kids back. I've never told my kids once in their life, go to school, get a good education, that you might get a good job, which is the mantra that we have coming out of the industrial age. That's a story for another time. Yeah. But I've always said to them, yes, go to school, do the very best you can, put your best effort in so that you might be able to grow up and create jobs for other people. I've always taught my children to be entrepreneurial. Yeah. And I've always allowed them the grace to pursue. You don't have to be no doctor, lawyer, engineer, computer scientist. Whatever is your passion, I always encourage my kids to pursue that.
Mhm.
And so truth is that we have a family. Each one of them that are in music right now, I have 5 kids that are in music. One of them is in aesthetics and design. And the 2 last ones already show every sign, a symptom of having that gene in them. We are just a family of artists.
Do they work together?
I'm sorry?
Do they have Tory and his brothers have they worked
They
together on
collaborate. When the last album that Tory um, released from prison is called Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the nature of that album, it's the first album that he released after this whole incident that has happened, was called Daystar. He did that 3 months after. So the album that he just released, the latest album he released from prison, is called Peterson. So Daystar Peterson. So on this album, you will hear Hollywood Sos, who is his oldest brother, is on there. Moses, who is called Yoko Gold, is on there. His sister Destiny is also on that, and Wolfgang Peterson. They're all of it. In fact, I even did a spoken word piece on the song called "Guide Me Through the Storm" on that album. So you get to hear from each of them, and you go listen to that album, and you see how talented they really are, all of them. And so they always have. Scripture says, as iron sharpens iron, so the countenance of one man brightens his friend. But Tory was the youngest of my original family. I'm now remarried since 2011. My wife's name is Wonder. She's Kenyan. And so we have the 2 smaller kids, which is 10, the girl is 10 and the boy is 13. Okay. And so they always, as a family, have always pushed each other, have always been a challenge and an encouragement to each other in their fields of music and so on and so forth. But when Tory grew up, he was the youngest. When his mother passed, he was only 11. Wow. So he was the youngest of them. And that seems to happen with the youngest child a lot. It's almost like that one has to prove himself. Yeah. And so, but Tory was a businessman from 5. From 5. That kid would come to me, Dad, can I have $5? I want to go buy some chocolates at the dollar store. You gonna come back with a bag of chocolates. You know, you pay $1 and come back with at least 10 chocolates, these little things in a bag. And next thing I knew, he's taking them to school and selling them back for $1, making a bunch of money.
Oh, wow. So he's always been an entrepreneur.
Always had that mindset, always had that kind of drive. God said he's going to be a revolutionary light of revelation to a generation. And that's what I have seen in his life. So I think being the youngest one and really having to prove himself with his brothers, that made him grind and work even more.
Who, from your understanding, who was a very instrumental person that would say put Tory on?
The first people that really took a look at him, that started to hear his music over the internet on YouTube, I believe, would have been Justin Bieber and Sean Kingston. And at the time, they reached out. In fact, Justin used to bring Tory up on stage when he was playing, a couple of times when he played the Air Canada Centre in Toronto. He brought Tory out. He wanted to sign him at the beginning, but his manager, Scooter Braun, this guy is a legend in the music business right now in terms of management and, developing artists. Scooter thought that Tory was a bit wild. So he didn't, he discouraged Justin from, signing him and that kind of thing. So Sean Kingston was touring during those days with Justin. He would be like a warm-up act for Justin Bieber. And so he reached out to Tory and they signed, what was it, like a 3-year contract or something? But in the midst of it, unfortunately, he really never did anything for him. I think there were some issues with his mom always, for some reason, did not really encourage Daystar.
Wow.
However, before that contract was over, Daystar was always, trying to find his own way. He went through a few managers. There's two of them that I could think about, and then he met a dude called Sasha Stone, who was he was the visionary behind, was it West by Northwest, was happening in Texas, but he was never
South by Southwest.
South by Southwest.
Yeah.
Did I just say North
No,
by Northwest?
yeah. The opposite.
Man, that's that Canadian thing. We the North,
Yeah.
Toronto Raptors. Yeah, South by Southwest. He was a major part of that festival. Was it that festival or something similar to that? I forget.
It's in Texas, right?
Yeah, it would happen down in that way. And but he was never a manager. But he and Tory somehow got in touch with each other, and he decided he wanted to manage Tory. He saw the talents that was in him, and so they had to wait out, I think, like the last 6 months of the contract that he had with Shawn, and then that's where. So I would say if anybody knocked down the doors and did amazing work in getting Tory recognized, I think he was also responsible for introducing him to Interscope Records, and that's where it took off for him.
Wow. Wow,
Yeah.
that's an amazing story. I never knew about the Sean Kingston situation.
Yeah. Shawn was there earlier in the picture, but it never went anywhere.
Now, where was the during the height of Tory's success, what were the key some moments that made you stop and say, "Wow, my son really made it"?
I don't know if I don't think I've ever really had those moments. I think for me, I've never been a starstruck type of a person.
Yeah.
I was involved in that world before any of my kids were ever born.
Yeah.
And so I know what it is to appear on every network variety special coming out of Toronto. Forgive me, the word "every" sounds like that's too outlandish. But we were on many variety specials, shows that were being done via television. We were doing the biggest clubs. We were doing the A-list spots.
Name the group and the type of style dance you guys did, just so they know.
We were just a bunch of energetic, streetwise kids that met in clubs and discos and parties, and we would just dance battle each other. And one day a guy said to us, "Listen, I'm doing a New Year's Eve show. Can you guys put something together and come and to be a part of the show?" And we said, "Yeah." We never did. Somehow that never came off because we never got to do the show. It never happened. Yeah. But that's where we stopped dance battling and became a crew. So we called ourselves Soul Express. Okay. Soul from Soul Train, yeah. Express from BT Express. Let's get it on. It's time to get down. That's BT Express back in the day. Oh, yeah. And so we put those two together and we called ourselves Soul Express. But we were greatly inspired by locker dancers on Soul Train and people like that. And so again, when we did our thing, man, we were determined to be the very, very best. We didn't even know that things would jump off for us the way they did, but we had something different. We had something that Canada had not seen. We took what the lockers were doing, and when we put a whole acrobatic type of a twist on it while popping and locking and doing those kinds of things. And so a choreographer saw one of my friends on a show, which was sort of a takeoff on Soul Train. Canada called it Boogie. I think that was on City TV. And we used to frequent that on Saturdays as they were filming. And a choreographer saw my friend, who's one of my best friends to this very day. His name is Clarence Ford. He's the director of Ford Entertainment. And he was performing, just dancing on the show. And this choreographer called Vlad Hendera saw him. He was They had a school called Roland and Roman, not Vlad, what am I saying? Roland, was it Hendera? Anyhow, Roland and Romaine, right? And he saw my friend. He called up the producer of the show and said, "Who is that guy?" And he described him. He said, "This guy, when he's dancing, he looks like he's defying gravity. I'd like to meet this guy." And so he set up a meeting, was on a Tuesday morning, to meet with Clarence at his dance studio. And he was waiting for Clarence, and 5 guys showed up. And he's like, "Who are you guys?" "We're Soul Express." "All right, show me what you guys do." And we performed for an audience of 1. Roland would later say, "Man, you guys danced like you were dancing in front of 5,000 people." And he took us under his wing, and he started to teach us the art of really choreographing and so on and so forth. That's where I learned from.
Wow.
So that's where it began. Then he introduced us to Catherine McCartney, a Scottish-Canadian lady with creative and Prendergast talent. That's what they were called. So they took us under the wing. They molded us. They taught us what was to be professional on stage and off of stage. And they showed us the way. And it was from there, they got us into clubs. Bro, if we were to go back and do a biopic of our story, part of it would read that we were in places that we were not expected to ever be because we were blacks. We were the wrong color. We did the Imperial Room at the Royal Alex, not Royal Alex, Royal Alex Theater is something else that spun off of that. But we did the Imperial Room at the biggest hotel, or the most, can I say, prestigious hotel in all of Toronto, the Royal York Hotel. At least that's what it's called. That's where kings, queens would stay when they visited Toronto. And that's where we were performing. According to the nature of things back in the late 70s, we weren't even supposed to be in such rooms like that. But that's where our management took us in, and our talent is what spoke loudly for us. We were undeniable in how good we were at what we did.
So this is where some of Tory gets his talents from.
I would say, like I said, I believe God has gifted us with an artistic gene, honestly. Yeah. And then their mother, she could sing.
Okay.
She's an amazing singer. So I believe, a lot of that, I mean, they grew up around music.
Okay.
Both in church, at home. I was always showing them, things that would stimulate their interest in terms of the arts, dance, music. They were very much in that kind of an environment.
So now, when you stood in that Los Angeles courtroom and heard the verdict, what was the first feelings that hit you as a father?
I would say that the feelings that hit me was, yes, as a father, but also as a leader, as an apostle. I sat in a trial for over 2 weeks, and I saw a tremendous miscarriage of justice. I saw a judge on the bench being pro-prosecutor, and the prosecutor being what you call overzealous prosecutors. I saw the destruction, the repression of evidences. I saw a judge siding to ensure that the things that proved Daystar's innocence, things that were revealed already in discovery, because he was not the first judge. The judge that presided over Daystar's case is a guy called David Herrenford, Judge David Herrenford, in the Superior Court of Los Angeles. And the judge that was before him, the case was afterwards passed to him. I don't know, but in discovery, there was a totally different judge. And there were things that were in discovery. For example, so-called bullet fragments, which today, right now, we know and can prove from hospital records that There was no such thing as bullet fragments. That was never said. There's no doctor's report on planet Earth that ever said that.
Wow.
What they call was foreign bodies that were found in her foot. And when the emergency doctor examined the night when she came in, said she sustained lacerations as consistent with being cut by glass. Next thing you knew, in discovery, the so-called bullet fragments that the prosecution is presenting have gone missing. They went missing. I stood there and saw that in supposedly a gun charge, a gun was never presented in court. They sealed the firearm so that the defense has never even been able to examine the firearm. How do you have a gun charge and you do not present fingerprints, which would be perhaps the most damning evidence
Exactly.
in court? Then on top of that, there was the DNA evidence. We come to find out afterwards that the DNA evidence came to a place where it showed no DNA of Tory's on that weapon anywhere. And this is what a lot of people don't know. You have a lot of overzealous people out here. They choose sides and this and that and blah, blah, blah. I'm Team Megan, I'm Team Tory and all the rest of it. But the truth be told, the prosecution, when the results came back that his DNA was not there, the next step was to take it to a second or further testing.
Yeah.
They stopped it. They did not allow it to go any further so that they could get in court and argue that on the clip, there was no DNA of his, was excluded, and then they could argue in court that the gun was saying inconclusive. At inconclusive, because we've had one of America's, if not the best DNA expert that has examined this and said that the likelihood of his DNA being on that firearm would be 0. whatever percent, which meant that of the one male DNA that was on that firearm, which have excluded, that's not Tory's. Only one male DNA is on there. And I think there's 2 females. Only one male DNA. Definitely not Tory. That was already concluded.
Yeah.
So it comes back that what is on there of a male DNA could be 1 in a billion African people of African descent, black people.
Yeah.
That was on that fire. So I'm hearing all of this, knowing all of that throughout the trial.
Yeah.
And then at the end, seeing a judge bend over backwards to push a jury in a certain direction. These are writs that we brought to the appellate court. The appellate court said, we're not going to be looking at writs. We're just going to look at what was presented as evidence in trial.
Explain a writ.
A writ of habeas corpus is a Latin word which simply means give us the body, or give us the body on these particular grounds. So direct appeal is based on only evidence that happens inside of the trial in the courtroom. The writ now, you can't bring in any other thing. So the writs speak to things that were not presented in evidence, but are strong enough to show that this person should never be in prison, period. So that's the difference between a writ of habeas corpus and a direct appeal motion or whatever the case may be. So I'm stating all of that because my reaction was, number one, not just based on a verdict. My reaction was based on seeing the stench of injustice from day one to day conclusion. So a lot of people saw me in a video on YouTube or wherever platforms they were played, speaking and raising my voice to the highest heavens and calling heaven and earth to bear record that day that I am prophesying that the people who did this to my son, none of them are ever going to see peace. They will not until they repent of the evil that they know that they have done. And so when that's what you saw,
Yeah.
what was never seen is what I actually said in the courtroom once this verdict was handed down, based on how many different Brady violations, suppression of evidence, all kinds of things that happened in that trial. So I was very calm and composed inside, or should I say outwardly.
Mm-hmm.
I was boiling on the inside because I knew what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And once the jury was dismissed, because they basically did what was given to them, or decided, I believe, on what was given to them.
Yeah.
But at that point, I stood up in that courtroom, and it's interesting to me that it was not really reported heavily, because the courtroom was packed with journalists, both network media, they call legacy media, and new media people that were there. And it's interesting. I stood up in the courtroom with the judge being present, and I said, today, this court stands judged before the judgment seat of God. And I told them all straight and plain, down to the prosecuting attorneys, that you guys know exactly what you did. And you may sit here and you may tap dance around law, but law and justice are not the same. And this is the greatest miscarriage of justice. So basically, when I got outside, walked out of the courtrooms, a bunch of cameras and press and media set up there. Mr. Peterson, how do you feel about what I said? I gotta tell you exactly how I feel. And it's not a mystery. I've said it publicly that I feel that I, number one, sat and I watched a tremendous miscarriage of justice. I call the judgment of God down in that situation. And I said that Roc Nation will crumble, and I still believe it will crumble. I still believe with all of my heart that Jay-Z, as I've seen him in dreams, talk about those prophetic dreams, I've seen that guy with tops on or jackets on and his pants off, his underwear only showing, which speaks to me. He is going to be exposed. I don't care where he runs. I don't care where he hides, unless he repents. And all of those who have been cohorts with him in that whole thing, they're going to see that the God that we serve doesn't play. In this world, people believe that what really calls the shots are those who have billions of dollars in their bank accounts. They believe that they are the shot callers. But watch out when God begins to call the shots from heaven. This will not stand. So that's how I felt. But it was not, yes, as a father for my son, of course, no parent wants to see their child treated like that. Too many lies have been spun, lies in the media, lies every which way, because of people who have their hands on the levers of power to make certain things look a certain way. And that's been a lot of what happens in the United States of America. So things are not always what they seem.
You referenced an independent witness whose behavior changed after meeting with court officials. What about that moment made you feel something was off?
That specific situation, again, here's a question. Why would a trial, including a firearm and charges of violence perpetrated on another individual, why would the prosecuting attorneys not call the only independent witness? You've laid out all manner of testimony, even on your side, that people were drinking at a party and they were drunk and they were whatever. So the only two people sober in that scenario is the driver, who was not drinking at the party, Tory's driver, and you have one independent witness that we knew about at that time. There's another witness, by the way, that we've also come to learn that's never been called forward. But this one witness who made the 911 call, who spoke to the lead officers that arrived on the scene that night, and then spoke to the lead detective that was appointed to the case going forward before any charges were ever laid, which was they came in what you call the 11th hour. They were not even going to charge him until some other things happen. And I'm going to keep silence on that for now. But the world will know. As I sit here in this chair, I'm telling you, the world will know. Okay? So when that witness is the only person who is of sober mind and looking down from his balcony is happening right in front of his house. We're not talking about a balcony on the 10th floor, by the way. Yeah. These are houses in Hollywood Hills, not apartments. You're talking about a balcony that could just be above your garage.
Yeah.
He's not far removed. He saw it. Why was the 911 call sealed? This is evidence, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
Huh? Why would the prosecution not call that witness? That witness never showed up at court because the prosecution said, yeah, he saw it and this is what happened. This is a witness for our prosecution. No, we had to call upon that witness to come to court to testify what he saw, what he said to the lead officer that night, what he said on the 911 call, and what he said to Detective Stogner, who came how many days after, a week, I don't even know. But his story was consistent until he got to court. And it just so happened that my wife and I were sitting across the hallway. I mean, literally directly. You know how benches are set up in a court hallway.
Yeah.
We were over here. This man was sitting over here. And our attorney, who came to greet him after that the prosecutors came out. This is a witness that you did not want to call.
Yeah.
But yet you come out and you have the unmitigated gall to take this man in an elevator up to another floor and go through whatever. By the time he came down and that man sat there, and our lawyer, you're talking about a lawyer who comes out, he's sharply dressed in a suit. He doesn't look like a killer. He doesn't look like a ruffian. And all he does is extends his hand to say, good morning, Mr. Kelly. Thank you for being here. And you see the witness pull back and refuse to talk to him. Like if you were talking like if you were talking to somebody who's trying to hijack you on the street.
Yeah.
That's what happened. That I saw with my own two eyes. Nobody told me about that. That's what happened.
Very peculiar.
Very, very peculiar.
So, wow. So, man, this is it's super strange. Now, what happened is, before I get to this one question, is there a possibility that, because I heard this is a rumor, I don't know, so I'm asking you, the representations or the attorneys that Tory first had, could they have been possibly bought by Roc Nation to kind of put or lead Tory into this position by maybe not filing certain things, or,
The attorney that Tory had, I can tell you this from my own knowledge, because throughout this entire scenario, you got to understand that we're not just a family of artists and entertainers. We're a family that gets on the phones every day without fail, no matter where we are. If someone had a previous meeting that they could not get away from, we would cover that person. But this family comes together every day, sometimes twice a day, morning and evening, most weeks in the evenings after everyone's work or whatever they're doing that day. We will come together and we pray. We've been praying about this situation from the day it started. We've been praying. And within the past 3 years, I could say we intensified our prayer regimen around this whole matter. And so what I know is, because I've been step by step with my son, we talk about things all the time. So every decision that's of consequence that needs to be made, he has asked my advice, my opinions. For example, and I'll get to Miss Shawn Holley in a moment. For example, Dad, the police have asked for me to come in and give a sample of my DNA to test for this weapon. That's a serious ask. In America, you have the right to say no. No. You watch the TV shows to see how prosecutors or detectives or even defense will go, secretly to try to grab some DNA. You don't have to do it. You're not compelled to give DNA.
Yeah.
That's your right.
They'll plan it.
Right. That's your right.
Yeah.
So he asked me, what should I do? We prayed. I said, son, go. Just go give your DNA. So what a lot of people today out here trying to pick sides don't know, Tory never had anybody take DNA off of him. He volunteered. Guilty men in such a case do not go to volunteer DNA.
Yeah.
That would be stupid, right? If you have any sense at all.
Mm-hmm.
So with all of that said, I was privy to every time Shawn Holley came and they said, first they dangled in the media, oh, this guy could be facing up to 22 years, blah, 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 right? I was privy when Shawn Holley came and said that the DA is offering 6 years. What should we do? And he is the one that's decided, I didn't do this. Why should I be copying a plea for? See, that's what they do to black folks all the time and to people who have no money to fight the system.
Mm-hmm.
They dangle this big carrot. The carrot looks so big it will choke you. And then they come down with a smaller, more digestible, whatever. He didn't. Then they came back. And at one point, Ms. Holley actually told the DA or the prosecutors ahead of Tory that he would take a plea. And at no time, in fact, at every turn, he has always told her, I'm not pleading. I'm believing God for total exoneration. I did not do this.
Period.
But she was the one always batting for him to take a plea. You would think she was dealing with somebody in the street. And by that, I don't mean to demean anyone in the street, but I'm talking about somebody who doesn't have money to fight for justice. Because it takes money to fight for what's supposed to be justice in this country.
And Shawn Holley was his attorney.
Shawn Holley was the attorney of record at that point in time.
So
we came also to find out later, Shawn Holley wants to make it look in public as though she left the case because Tory wanted her to do this, and that's a lie. She left the case when we found out that everything we saw indicated that she could have been in bed with Roc Nation from day one. The woman is part of the executive producers team of those who produce the show Reasonable Doubt. I think that's on Hulu or wherever that's on. Reasonable Doubt. The show is called Reasonable Doubt, which is Jay-Z's first studio album and first hit album.
Yeah.
Right? Every episode of the show is named for a hit song for Jay-Z, 99 Problems, blah, 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 blah. You don't just go pick up music and say, this sounds like a good concept. No, you got to get those music cleared. You have to go through a lot to get them cleared, because sometimes it may be a writer or maybe the studio owns this, blah, 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 blah. And all through it, her daughter sing on the project, Meg Thee Stallion. And you knew that all the time. But you were still going along trying to get my son, advising him that it would be good to cop a plea all that time. So the devil is a liar. And I'm telling you again, before heaven and earth, all of them, not one of them that has had a hand in the lynching of my son will ever go unpunished unless they repent and ask God's forgiveness.
As Tory's father, how has this entire trial affected your trust in the justice system as a whole?
I've never had trust in the justice system of men, whether it's in America or any other place, because you have to understand human beings are fallible. Only God is infallible. Only God does not make mistakes. So for me, that's not really a question for me to answer from the premise upon which it's presented. The truth about it is, I don't trust the systems of men. By the way, that's not to say that there are no just people in the system. You have to understand that, man, on earth right now, especially the more we see sin proliferating in the earth, the more you come to realize that law and justice are like two distant relatives that don't even hardly get together on Thanksgiving, never mind Christmas or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So I've never really held a lot of stock. And this situation only proves to me more than ever. Yes, there is justice being done in some parts, some places. Somebody's gotten justice somewhere. But it's growing more and more when it comes to people of color, black folks especially, that there is no such thing as a justice system. And it's been proven over and over again. It's interesting to me when I sit down and listen to people like Charlemagne pontificating on the Breakfast Club, talking about, oh, well, you know, the courts, this and it's already been said that. And Charlemagne, you live in New York, for heaven's sake, and people like you live in various places. You know that you cannot just take a verdict because it's come and say, oh, we just have to abide by that. That's nonsense. How many people have lost their lives on death row or whatever because of an incorrect verdict? You find out later on that the DNA that was hidden said different. Give me a break.
I wanted to ask a couple more questions on the how about the other girl, not Megan Thee Stallion, but the other girl,
Chelsea Harris, her assistant.
Yes. There's so much confusion, so much rumor. I just want to ask you, what is her position? It seems like everyone thinks that she shot the gun. She seemed like she was going to help Tory. What is her position? Do you think that she's being threatened? Is she genuinely a good person? From your understanding,
I don't know Kelsey like that, so I could never, I couldn't venture to answer questions that I really wouldn't have the answer to because I don't know her. All I do know is that after Tory broke with Interscope Records and refused to go down the rabbit hole with them, they wanted to control his masters. He basically had to declare very loudly in the public view, and that being on IG, that I know what goes on in this building. You guys don't give me my masters, I'm going to expose what's going on in this building. From that day, the system or the industry out there, because the industry is big, but it's very small at the same time because the people behind it, there's a lot of back channel calls that happen. And so from the time he did that, he became public enemy. Roc Nation wanted to sign him shortly after that. He was already making and writing music, songs for some of their artists. So they knew exactly what who he was. He showed up at a Roc Nation brunch. The next thing you know, Megan Thee Stallion and her assistant, and she testified of this on the stand, by the way. I think both of them did, but Meg Shirley did testify on the stand that she told Kelsey to, stay close to him because he's someone that we could, I could use for business later on. And that's just me paraphrasing. I don't know exactly how the conversation went, just the essence of it. All right. Kelsey began to stay close because that's what she was told. And I have to wonder if such orders didn't come from higher up than those two, right? And so that's how that began to play out on that side. Later on, Kelsey gets a case of COVID, has to go back to Houston to convalesce there. And she comes back 3 months after is when this whole situation went down. And so at that point in time, we kind of have an overview of what happened in the vehicle. But again, the independent witness that the state didn't want to call says The only fight he saw on the street that day was those two. Those two fighting each other. And if you go to 36hourslater.com, 36hourslater.com, you will see that there are photos that were never brought to court. Why would the prosecution not bring all of these photos to court that's supposed to be damning evidence because it does not damn Tory? Those two were fighting. The only independent witness that shows up says they were fighting. At least he got that out on the stand. So you have to wonder, where all of the conspiracies behind the scenes go. And here's a really good one for you. Meghan, to this day, have not had any more friendship with Kelsey after that night when two of them got pissed off at each other in the car because they were trying to check for the same man, right?
Yep.
But yet, Meghan pays her rent for 1 year. All of that comes out in testimony. It's not even something that I'm trying to make up.
Hold on.
Right here.
So it's
right
on
now.
record
That's
that
on
Meghan
record.
is paying her rent
For
since
1
that day.
year. He paid her a rent, I think, a year ahead or whatever, how it went. I don't know if it was month by month, but that is evidence. That's testimony that came out.
Wow.
So you have to, you don't want to be friends with this person anymore, but now your prosecuting attorneys are up here trying to make it seem like my son tried to bribe you with $1 million, but yet you're the one that's paying for this girl who no longer likes you, and in fact, she's trying to diss you on a diss track, shots fired. Like, you gotta wonder, this whole thing has been a mess from the beginning. But I believe God, who says that all things that are done in darkness will be revealed in the light.
I just want to get a little clarification on the last two, I guess, appeals rejection. Can you tell us what was the reasons or their reasoning for denying his appeal?
How do I answer this? This is a very, you know what? And whoever will hear this, I want to make it very clear. I believe my son has been a political prisoner in the state of California. Not meaning that the government of the state has reached out a long hand and say, let's condemn this boy, let us put him in prison. But political prisoner in the sense that, number one, the judiciary is a branch of government. The judiciary, the prosecutors have conspired together to incarcerate my son. And there are things I warn the public that are about to come out and will come out. That's going to show, it's going to cause this whole thing to be busted wide open. People will see what I'm talking about. So for now, it may seem as though I'm speaking in code or whatever the case may be, because simply Solomon said in the book of Ecclesiastes, there's a time to speak and there's a time to keep silent. So there are certain things that I wouldn't want to speak about premature that I know that's coming down the pipeline. And when people see this, it's going to make them really stand up and wonder, how could such a thing be done? When we got to the appellate court, we presented in total, I believe, about 17 different articles to the appellate court. I think 12 of them were writs. 12? Sorry, it would be 19. 12 of them were writs of habeas corpus, and 7 points were the appeals. The DNA, for example. You know what one expert said? Picking Tories, concluding that, and that word, by the way, was never ever mentioned in court. They never said his DNA, it was concluded that this is his DNA. They said, this is what they argued, this is why they stopped the DNA testing at a point. They said that it was inconclusive, meaning in their minds that it's not saying that it is excluded. So you're going to put a person in jail for 10 years on DNA evidence that you cannot conclude, and you're just going to say, but it doesn't say it is excluded? Are you sick? Yes, you are. You're sick with power. You're sick with the vision that one day you could become the Attorney General of the state of California. That's what this is all about. It's about wins and losses, W's and L's. You don't care nothing about justice, right? That's exactly what it's all about. So when it came down to the appeal, which was decided by them based on 7 particular points that we presented, which anybody that sees that, it's out there for public consumption. Anybody that saw, because the appeal, I wish that the trial had been public, but they made sure that one was not public at all.
Made sure.
They made sure that that was not public, not for the hatchet job they were about to do. But in the appeal, basically, they came back and said that we're not granting an overturn of the appeal. When we know from the inside that's not the direction in which they were leaning. It's like a great hand came down at the end and said, no, do it this way. And I believe God. See, one thing about God, he is the omniscient God. That means he's all-knowing. He's also omnipresent. That speaks for itself. And I don't care if you bury the evidence in the very deepest depth of the Pacific Ocean. God can find it. He can bring it to light. So yes, they denied his appeal, but it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there, because we are going to go to the Ninth Circuit, which is the federal court of the state of California. We're not stopping at all. We know our son is innocent. He knows he's innocent of these charges and the corruption that has ensued. So we're not stopping.
Now, where were you when you got the news when your son got stabbed in jail?
I was at home. We had just gotten up in the morning, and I think we were taking our kids to school on that morning. Yeah, we had just gotten up, and somewhere in the course of getting everybody ready to get out of the house and all of that is when we heard from his attorney that this had happened. And of course, when I contacted the watch commander's office, because I am the person of record as his emergency contact, we contacted them. They didn't even reach out to us. And by the time we contacted and got through to them, they said he had gotten stabbed 3 times, which was a lie. It was 14, as now the whole public knows. That's a whole other situation. I'm not going to speak any further than that about it, but we will see what will come out of that as well.
Wow, man. The stuff that you guys have endured, not only just Tory, but you guys as a family and as a father. I'm a father.
Yeah.
To hear about my kids ever getting stabbed, I wouldn't know how to take that.
But I might add, though, since you said that, the triumph of this is if God was not real, and if we didn't have a relationship with God, Tory'd be dead. His lungs were punctured, and he couldn't breathe on his own. He was literally choking to death in the vehicle that they were nonchalantly driving him to the hospital in. And he called out to them and said, I cannot breathe. I'm not going to get there. And by God's grace, whoever the person was that had authority had enough compassion to say, we're not going to make it. Let's turn him around and get him on the helicopter. It was already suggested to take the copter from the beginning. They kept saying, oh no, it's, the lack of humanity and the schemes that go on in prison. One of the things that I have learned so much about, besides knowing the fact that God has never created mankind to be in bondage, the bondage of incarceration, bondage to drugs, bondage to sex, bondage to anything that controls the human mind and warps it in a particular direction. That's not God's will for mankind, period. God does not want people to be, before many people go to prison, they are already in prisons of their own design. That's what gets them there many times, right? But if it were not for God, we would not be still talking about Tory Lanez, except people would have been saying he used to be a great artist or whatever the case may be. So I want to thank God, because in the midst of all of it, God is still triumphant. He's never lost a battle, ever.
That part. So, what do you want the world to understand about you, your son, and the legacy you're trying to build moving forward?
What we want the world to know, again, is that God is very real. That Psalms 46 says he's a very present help in times of trouble. Psalms 91 says he will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will trust. Jesus said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. I am with you every day. So whatever you're going through, know that God is there for you. But it's important for you to grow a relationship with God. One of the things that has come into my thoughts and out of my mouth during this whole situation more than once, several times, I've told people, I've even spoken as we are speaking now in an interview, and I've said, I am glad that I knew God before the crisis happened. Many people wait until a crisis happens and then they're scrambling for God. And at that point, your prayer is one of desperation. It's not one of faith.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. It's not one of faith. So don't wait for the crisis to come, because there's always opportunity in the midst of crisis. There's always opportunity on the edge of chaos. You know, the Chinese character for chaos or crisis actually is a double fold. It speaks crisis, but it also speaks to opportunity. So there's always opportunity, but don't wait, because at the time that something happens and you are now bent out of shape, you're bewildered, you're fearful, that's not a time to be praying, because your prayers are not prayers of faith, and God does not answer prayers that are not prayers of faith. Yes. He says without faith, it's impossible to please him. The other thing I would like people to know is that my family will ever be dedicated to seeing the freedom of people. I met a lot of beautiful people as I've been visiting Tory. One of the things that was developed while he was yet at the prison in Tehachapi, my wife one day had a direction from God and told him, hey, take this week, turn off your phones, tell your office you're not going to be communicating about business, just go before God. He wants to tell you some things. He obeyed that, and out of that came, one of the things that came was the Hands of God project. So we have a whole charity called the Hands of God that to date has already paid monies to see post-conviction cases heard for, I forget the number now, at least 67 inmates. And I personally met people in that system that I know the only reason why they're there is because they didn't have the power to fight. They didn't have the voice to speak. But God has given us a big platform, and we're going to fight not only for that, but for other causes in our world. I personally want to see monies going into research on behalf of children, you know, the most vulnerable among us, whether it be a St. Jude's or Sick Children's Hospital in Toronto. You know, these are causes that I care about, and Tory's always been that. That's one of the things they tried to downplay at his sentencing, when so many people wrote from everywhere of how he has helped them, things I didn't even know about because he doesn't tell, you know, of a lot of the things that he does. But yeah, our family will be dedicated henceforth to really helping people more than ever before.
I was even told your son financed a nonprofit group that helped change a law to release
Mhm.
a lot of individuals out of jail in the
That
state
is
of
the truth.
California.
That is the truth.
And it had to do with enhancements, which is ironic that he got
The enhancement.
enhancements
Yeah,
because
yeah,
of the gun charge
yeah.
for his sentencing.
Yeah. You know, people will scream and question when I say what I'm about to say, but the parallel to Jesus is crazy. I'm not saying my son is Jesus. We know who he is. But isn't that the same thing Jesus did? In order for you and I to have wealth, he left his throne in glory and became poor, that, as Paul said, for our sake, that we might become rich. He took on our sin that we might take his righteousness.
Wow.
He came and dealt a death blow to fear, took fear upon himself. The Bible said he was tested in all points like we are, yet without sin. So in scripture, there's something that we call substitution and identification, which speaks of all the substitutionary sacrifices he made to become us so that we could become him. But let's not forget, after all of that, then comes the resurrection. And the triumph of the resurrection is so much more glorious than the original life. And I believe with all my heart that we shall yet see the triumph of resurrection and the power of it in our lives, although we've gone through what we've gone through. We're not crying. We're not begging. We're not any of that. We're standing up for truth, for justice. Listen, my friend, there's a book called The Fox's Book of Martyrs, which shows all of the people that were martyred from the time of the apostles, Jesus included, to the time of the Dark Age period or the Middle Ages, you know, what we call medieval times. You know, so many people that stood up for Christ. You know, Savonarola, who they pierced him through with the spear so many times. The Roman authorities deny Jesus, no. Deny Jesus, no. And with the blood pouring out of every crevice, he stood there and he said, now you've given me many more holes with which I can praise my Lord. There are people, you know, last one to mention for now without taking up all the time, Bishop Ignatius, who on his way to a Roman imprisonment, just like Saul was for preaching the gospel in the 1st century under Emperor Nero. In the 2nd century after Nero, Paul was in the time of Nero. Ignatius wrote a letter ahead to the churches in Rome and said to them these words. He says, listen, although I am bound as a prisoner, he said, I'm the Lord's prisoner. This has happened to me because of my service to the Lord. And he says, when I get to Rome, whatever gruesome death they have devised for me, he says, if it be so gruesome that I cry out, he says, even then I beg you, do not plead for my release. Do not deny me the victory of the martyr's crown. We come from a long line of people who would rather take death than to deny Jesus Christ. So we're not crying. We're not sitting here. We're not a victim. We're kings.
Yeah.
We're kings. And we will triumph as kings.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sonstar. Thank you for being on Wild Mogul's TV. We
It's
had
a
a
pleasure, my friend.
wonderful
Appreciate being here.
conversation. And there was so much that we didn't actually speak about. So I think we need to do this again, God willing.
Hey, man, let's do it.
Yeah. So
Let's
thank
do
you
it.
again for being here.
Yes, I appreciate you and thank you so very much. And God bless to everybody that's getting to hear this. I really pray that God increase your store, bless you with health, bless you with divine well-being, wisdom, knowledge, understanding, give you creative ideas by which you can increase your wealth and status in this lifetime. Appreciate all of you that are hearing me today.
Thank you very much. You have a great day.
You too, brother.